Buzzbuster is back daily. Tonight, the quiet may finally be over. Reports suggest the one person Drake seemed most eager to leave in the shadows could be stepping back into full view. If the chatter coming out of TDE has any truth to it, this so-called Iceman phase might not last very long once the spotlight hits. Drake can rename the era however he wants. He can surround it with 3 fresh albums, 43 new tracks, a flood of intros, outros, skits, characters, and stylized visuals designed to make the whole rollout feel massive. He can lean into the frozen image with the chains, the hoodie, the branding, and every polished detail meant to sell the persona. Still, all of that presentation may not matter if the person at the center of the story is really preparing a response. For the past 2 years, it has looked like Drake was carefully circling around one name. Even when that name seemed absent from the lyrics, the tension never really disappeared. In fact, it often felt like the entire comeback strategy was built with that same figure somewhere in the background, influencing the tone, the moves, and the message. Now the rumors are getting louder. According to talk coming from people close to Kendrick Lamar, this may not be a quiet return or a low-key release that lands for a moment and fades. The suggestion is that something much bigger could be on the way, something direct enough to shift the whole conversation in real time. That possibility is what makes this moment feel explosive. All the extra packaging, all the oversized rollout choices, all the effort spent building a new identity could suddenly be tested at once. If Kendrick really is coming back into the picture, Drake's latest era may be heading for its biggest challenge before it has even fully settled in.
Something much bigger is taking shape, and the signs haven't just grown louder, they've exploded into full view overnight. Before we go any further, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Not as a favor to me, but for the record. Because everyone scrolling by deserves to watch step by step how Aubrey Graham may have cornered himself, walked straight into a setup of his own making, and created a situation that could follow him every time the streaming numbers update over the next year. Now let's lay out the scene, because the setup is everything. In less than a single day, Drake didn't simply drop a project. He flooded the internet from every angle. 3 Iceman, Maid of Honor, Habiti, and 43 tracks arrived all at once, packing what felt like an entire era of material into one chaotic news cycle. On top of that came a 4-part visual rollout, a marketing push designed to go viral, and a whole lineup of supporters ready to frame the moment as a complete takeover. The plan was obvious. This was meant to feel like a crowning moment, the dramatic return of the king, the clean reset after a feud the world had already seen him come out on the losing side of. Everything about the rollout signaled redemption, dominance, and control. It was built to overwhelm the conversation before anyone could even question it. Yet the reaction that followed didn't match the script. Instead of landing like a victory lap, the whole thing immediately started raising bigger questions. The scale was enormous, the promotion was relentless, and the messaging was impossible to miss. But that only made the outcome more revealing. When you launch something this aggressively, every move gets magnified, every misstep becomes impossible to hide. And when the charts start refreshing, the real story won't be the campaign itself, it'll be what this rollout exposed.
What landed in front of us was something completely different. Not a sharp, focused statement, but a tidal wave. A messy, overloaded dump of music so massive and so noisy that even longtime Day One supporters are showing up in the comments admitting they can't sit through an entire project without mentally checking out. That is what happens when quantity gets mistaken for quality. Instead of shaping one flawless weapon, you take all the raw material and spread it across dozens of forgettable pieces. Sure, the numbers jump, streams pile up, tracking charts react for a moment. Yet the one thing he truly needed never arrives. He needed a defining moment, one record, one performance, one undeniable statement strong enough to make the culture pause and say his name with real respect again. Here's where it gets even more revealing. Buried inside that giant stack of songs, Drake didn't just rap, he sent signals. He threw carefully placed lines that sounded aimed at A$AP Rocky. There were references that seemed directed toward J. Cole. Some bars even came across like subtle side comments about Jay-Z to anyone listening closely. That choice may end up being the real headline, because he didn't limit those shots to easy targets or safe rivals. He appeared to challenge artists who, by any fair measure of pure skill, are performing at a higher level right now. That changes the entire conversation. Once you start sending messages upward,
People stop judging the volume of your output and start measuring the strength of your pen. And that is the risk he created for himself. When the music is bloated, the focus disappears. When the focus disappears, every jab feels less like a power move and more like noise. Instead of reclaiming the spotlight with one unforgettable moment, he may have handed everyone a reason to look closer at what's missing.
Here's the hard truth, and it's impossible to ignore. That legal move, the lawsuit he's been using like a shield, doesn't actually keep him safe from what's coming next. The moment those records hit the public, every rapper mentioned, directly, indirectly, or even brushed by across those 43 tracks, got a wide open invitation to step back in and answer him. Now, they hold the advantage. They can fire back whenever they choose, reveal whatever they feel like revealing, and put him in an uncomfortable spotlight on their own timeline. By putting out all 43 of those songs, he didn't just make noise, he unlocked 43 separate opportunities for people to respond. What he seemed to miss is that once you open that many doors, anyone can walk through them. That's when the whole mood changes. Because the reaction didn't come from anonymous social media pages, gossip-heavy blogs, or fan profiles hiding behind cartoon pictures. This response came from much closer than that. It came from inside the circle. It came from someone with real credibility, someone whose voice carries weight where it matters. Smack. Not a random name, not a distant observer. The very same Smack people saw standing right beside Kendrick Lamar at the pop-out. The same Smack who was also spotted on set during the Not Like Us video shoot. The same figure who has been physically present around Dot during the biggest and most talked about moments of this entire run. That detail matters because when a reaction comes from somebody that connected, it stops feeling like background chatter and starts sounding a lot more serious. Suddenly, this isn't just internet commentary floating around for a day and disappearing. It feels rooted, it feels informed, and more importantly, it feels like the kind of message people are going to pay attention to.
This wasn't chatter from someone vaguely connected to the story. It wasn't a blurry, anonymous message, and it definitely wasn't a random bystander trying to turn attention into clicks. The person speaking was Smack, someone deeply tied to TDE, someone who has earned Kendrick Lamar's confidence, and someone with a long, proven history of being present when real decisions are made. Meanwhile, everyone else was still trying to process Drake's sudden 3-album release. Critics were busy debating whether Iceman was passable or just barely listenable. Across social media, people were focused on mocking the cover art and turning the visuals into jokes. In the middle of all that noise, Smack reportedly faced the camera and dropped a line that instantly shifts the entire discussion. Mark my words, something big is happening. That's all I can say. Take a second with that statement. Read it carefully. Listen to how measured it sounds. Notice the control in it. And more importantly, notice how much he deliberately leaves unsaid. That doesn't sound like a fan guessing online. It doesn't feel like a polished promo line cooked up by a marketing team. There's no wild energy, no forced excitement, no empty hype. Instead, it comes across as something far more serious. The steady voice of a man who already has the full picture and is choosing every word with extreme care. He speaks like someone standing close to a major moment, aware that even one extra sentence could reveal too much. What makes it even more striking is what he avoided saying. There was no uncertainty in it. He didn't frame it as a possibility. He didn't suggest it was just a feeling. He didn't hint at a slim chance. The message was clear, deliberate, and loaded with meaning. Something is coming, and if Smack is the one signaling it, that alone is enough to make people pay attention.
Mark my words. It landed with the weight of a veteran fight coach delivering one final warning before the bell rings. Coming from someone who has been right beside Kendrick Lamar at concerts, video shoots, listening sessions, and even the late-night gatherings after everything else is over, that kind of line doesn't sound casual. It sounds loaded. You don't brush past a statement like that. You don't keep scrolling. You pause. You pay attention. You start watching every move a little more closely because people only speak with that kind of certainty when they believe they already know what's coming next. Now, place that warning next to everything Drake has done recently, and the picture starts to look a lot more interesting. It begins to feel less like bad luck and more like he stepped directly into a situation he never fully read. No one needed to build a trap.
if the path there was already wide open. Picture the whole thing like a chess match. The board is already active, and two major players have made their turns. J. Cole, after a difficult stretch following the beef, came back with what many listeners are calling the most important project of his career so far. It wasn't a small response or a quiet reset. It was a massive double-disc release that firmly placed him back in the center of the conversation. Drake answered with volume. Not one album, not two, 3 full-length projects. The move was bold, almost overwhelming, as if the goal was to flood the moment with so much music that no other narrative could survive beside it. At this stage, the pattern is impossible to ignore. 2 of the so-called Big 3 have already made their plays. 2 heavyweights have stepped forward and shown at hand, which means the silence around the last move may not be silence at all. It may be the part that makes everything else click into place.
Now the board sits wide open. Both sides are exposed, and only one move really matters. Just a single domino remains upright. One figure is still waiting in the shadows, and his quiet this year has been so intense that every other release has felt like warm-up music before the main event. That name is Kendrick Lamar. At this point, the clues are stacking up from every direction. Quotes, collaborator comments, public appearances, even the smallest gestures on red carpets all seem to tell the same story. He is not checked out. He is not taking time off. He is deeply focused. Start with the people closest to the process. Jack Antonoff, a producer tied to some of the biggest pop records of the past decade, has spoken about Kendrick as if he is practically living in the studio. That alone would get attention. Yet it does not stop there. Isaiah Rashad has added even more weight to the conversation. This is not some distant observer making a guess. He is a TDE artist who has spent more than 10 years inside that world. He has seen Kendrick's habits up close. He understands what that work ethic looks like when the pressure is on. And according to him, Kendrick is showing up in the studio more now than he did back in the early era. Think about how serious that sounds. The same artist behind To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, and GNX is reportedly pushing even harder than he did during those landmark chapters. Coming from people who are actually around him, that is not casual praise. It sounds like a warning shot. Everything about this moment suggests the silence is not empty, it is loaded. The longer the wait goes on, the more it starts to feel less like downtime and more like the calm before something massive arrives. None of that fits the image of an artist who has stepped away from the throne. It looks much more like someone moving carefully, staying silent, and setting the stage.
Then came the moment nobody could ignore, the 2026 Grammys. Kendrick showed up with his hand wrapped, offered no clear explanation, and kept the mystery alive by saying almost nothing afterward. No major press run, no long statement, just one striking image placed in front of millions. What made it even harder to dismiss was what happened next. Dave Free, his longtime creative partner, deliberately turned the camera back toward him. No speech, no dramatic reveal, just a subtle signal that felt impossible to miss. Look here, notice this, remember it. That detail didn't feel random. It didn't come across like a style move or a casual accessory. It felt planted, like the first clue in a story the public hasn't fully been given yet. In hip-hop, when an artist known for precision appears with imagery that loaded, and the person closest to his creative process quietly emphasizes it, people pay attention for a reason. So let's say the part fans have already been circling in the comments. Another album seems to be on the way. A lot of listeners are already calling it KL7, assuming it would mark his 7th full-length release. At this point, that number doesn't just sound like simple catalog math. It carries the weight of expectation, almost like something that has been building in the background for a while. Every piece of this feels deliberate. The silence, the image, the way it was framed. With Kendrick, nothing that's visible ever feels accidental. When someone that careful leaves breadcrumbs in plain sight, the smartest thing you can do is follow the trail. And right now, all signs seem to point toward the beginning of a brand new chapter.
If people around him are quietly saying something major is on the way, that should raise a very uneasy question for anyone cheering for Toronto in this whole saga. What does major actually mean when it's coming from the same machine that helped launch Not Like Us? How big is big for a camp that already pulled off the pop-out concert, briefly made Los Angeles feel completely united, shaped a Super Bowl halftime moment, turned a stadium show into something that felt larger than music, and changed how modern hip-hop rollouts are even imagined? Look at their pattern: precision, patience, and maximum effect. This group doesn't measure success the way everyone else does. Their standards operate on a totally different level.
What they consider a baseline is the kind of peak most artists spend an entire career chasing. Their upper limit is already somewhere far above the normal rules of the genre. That's why the warning matters. If the feeling inside that circle right now is that what's coming will be huge, then nobody should expect something small, routine, or easily contained. This may not be about simply getting the upper hand in a feud. It may not stop at controlling a release cycle. It may not even be about numbers, charts, or streams in the usual sense. The real possibility is something much larger. We could be looking at a move designed to shut the door on an entire era of hip-hop, not just score another headline. The kind of moment being hinted at here sounds less like a victory lap and more like a turning point. If that's true, the impact won't end with one artist or one city. It could force the whole genre to rethink its map, redraw its boundaries, and respond to a new reality.
Step back and look at Kendrick's track record. He has never been the kind of artist who buries the moment under endless releases, hoping one of them catches fire. That has never been his method. Instead, he delivers a single project that feels complete from front to back, carefully assembled, precisely ordered, with every piece serving a purpose. Once it arrives, he doesn't chase the reaction. He lets the music speak, and the culture does the rest. Just look at the pattern. Section 80, Good Kid MAAD City, To Pimp a Butterfly, Damn, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Every one of those releases felt less like a random drop and more like a major statement. They arrived with intention. They stood on their own. None of them felt tacked on to some rushed extra package, and none of them needed multiple companion releases to prove their value. That is exactly why the current signals matter. If the people closest to Kendrick are hinting that something major is developing, history suggests this won't be messy, scattered, or accidental. Whatever comes next is far more likely to hit with focus and control, like one carefully aimed move that changes the entire board. That stands in sharp contrast to the flood of activity Drake just put out. Here's where things get even more unsettling for Drake. This is the detail that should really have his team restless deep into the night, replaying every move and every message. Because if you read the situation plainly, the most unsettling possibility is also the simplest one. Kendrick wanted Iceman to be out there. He wanted Maid of Honor to happen. He wanted Habibi to exist. That possibility changes everything. If true, then none of this was random. None of it caught him off guard. It would mean Kendrick may have been watching the entire rollout play out exactly as expected, waiting patiently, saying nothing, and letting the moment build until the timing was perfect. He wanted every one of those tracks out there, all 43 of them, circulating across streaming platforms, feeding playlists, surfacing in recommendations, and settling permanently into the culture. There was a reason for that. He understood the moment the way a seasoned boxer reads a desperate move before it lands. Long before Drake returned to the mic, Kendrick already seemed to know exactly how it would unfold. The spectacle was predictable. The shifting personas were expected. The high-gloss presentation, the polished visuals, the carefully crafted intimidation, all of it felt familiar. Beneath the icy image, the haze, and the branding machine, there was still the same version of Drake people had seen before. Uneasy, reacting more than commanding, throwing shots at things that weren't really there, wrapping anxiety in a layer of luxury and style. That is the version who appeared. That is the version the audience got. Every line Drake sent in Kendrick's direction ended up doing the opposite of what it was supposed to do. Instead of slowing him down, it gave Kendrick another platform, another spotlight, another perfectly timed launch point. Each response seemed to clear fresh space for his rival to rise even higher. Now look at it through Kendrick's eyes, because the image is almost film-worthy. You're at home, watching all of this unfold. After already taking control of the biggest rap showdown of the current era, the attention is yours. The momentum is yours. Your name is attached to a Super Bowl halftime performance, placing you in a category few artists ever reach. From that vantage point, Drake's attacks don't feel like damage. They feel like assistance. They don't close doors, they open them. What was supposed to be a counterstrike starts looking more like promotion, as if every move meant to shake Kendrick only strengthened the story around him and made his position feel even more untouchable. What started as a single surprise record became something much bigger, a full-on citywide event stamped onto your legacy. The track hit with such force that it didn't just dominate playlists, it practically forced radio to reshape itself around the moment. Now picture this. 2 full years pass before your rival finally quits dodging and responds. Not with a quick reply either. He unloads 43 songs. Buried inside that run is a visual album where he creates a made-up version of you designed to resemble the way you looked in 50 Cent Power. He even has that character move in a way that echoes your own Rich Spirit video, all for the sake of throwing shots at a fictional copy, because the real version of you keeps making him seem smaller by comparison. It gets even more revealing. He tries to reuse the very structure and style of your records against you, including one song that plenty of listeners have openly described as an imitation of the same kind of tracks that already overwhelmed him the last time around. If you were Kendrick, that probably wasn't a moment of anger or frustration. It was comedy. The guy insisting he had moved on had just spent the better part of a decade circling the same obsession across 3 separate projects. That says a lot. From a strategy standpoint, Kendrick barely had to lift a finger. No urgent response, no desperate counterattack. He didn't even need to drop a verse to tighten the pressure. All he had to do was stay still and let the situation expose itself. That's what makes it so striking. Drake's own unease did most of the work for him. The more he pushed, the more he revealed. The longer Kendrick stayed quiet, the louder that silence became.
All Kendrick really had to do was wait and let the quiet grow heavy. As that silence stretched on, Drake seemed more and more compelled to occupy every inch of empty space with new material, new personas, surprise appearances, and increasingly theatrical presentation. Before long, the pattern was impossible to miss. Drake handed the audience reason after reason to keep circling back to Kendrick. That didn't feel accidental. It felt inevitable. When one artist controls the spotlight that completely, even the loudest move from his biggest opponent can end up reading like just another chapter in his narrative. Instead of shifting the focus away, it only fed the same conversation even more. There's also the regional layer, and that part matters. Drake wasn't perceived as aiming only at Kendrick. To many listeners, it looked like he was stepping into the wider identity of the West Coast itself. He tapped into the production style, echoed the vocal rhythm, and even reached toward the legacy of Mac Dre. Yet for people with a real connection to Mac Dre, for those who knew him personally and still carry his influence with seriousness, that nod apparently didn't come across the way it may have been intended. Rather than feeling like a respectful salute, it was seen by some as performance, more like putting on a look than honoring a history. On the West Coast, that kind of thing rarely slips by unnoticed. People pay attention when someone borrows the image without fully earning the meaning behind it. Now, the situation is bigger than a few subtle lines aimed at individual rappers. Beyond those quiet shots, Drake may have also stirred up an entire region that already had its own reasons to remember and react. Of course, there's always a version of this story where every one of those frustrations stays unspoken, where nobody responds, and where the tension simply fades into the background.
There's another outcome here, and it's the one hanging over everything right now. A single, carefully placed Kendrick verse could cut through all of this in one shot. Read that carefully, because that's the real pressure point of this moment. Plenty of loyal supporters are already lining up the usual defense. They'll point to the streaming totals, the opening day numbers, and the chart placements. Those stats sound impressive at first glance, but they don't tell the full story. Flooding the market with 43 songs in 24 hours doesn't prove dominance. It creates a surge by design. Naturally, the totals rise. Naturally, the catalog gets a temporary boost. When you expand the output that aggressively, the numbers are almost forced to swell for a while. Still, big streaming counts are not the same as admiration. They are not the same as influence. Most importantly, they are not the same as a moment that truly moves culture. The signal that matters most is the one that can't be manufactured. Are people hungry for more, or are they simply glad the rollout is finished? Take a look at any group chat. Scroll through any timeline. The feeling surrounding these 3 releases isn't amazement, it's fatigue. You can almost hear the energy draining out of the room. Instead of excitement building, the response feels like supporters quietly stepping back and putting the controller down. That changes the meaning of the entire moment. If your biggest push leaves even your own audience worn out, that isn't a takeover. It isn't a victory lap, it's an overload. And when the main reaction is exhaustion instead of anticipation, the message becomes impossible to ignore. More content does not automatically create more impact.
Nobody ever really brought this to a close. There's also the legal side of the story, and it hangs over everything like a flashing warning light that Drake's camp would probably rather avoid. It's incredibly hard to argue in court that a song damaged your image while at the same time centering multiple full projects around the very person connected to that song. One move clashes directly with the other. On one hand, the claim is that the record caused real harm. On the other, the music and visuals keep returning to Kendrick again and again. That mismatch is impossible to ignore. It's not subtle, it's not small. The contradiction is front and center. Now, every shot fired at Kendrick across these recent releases carries extra weight. Instead of helping the case, those records make the situation look even more complicated. In effect, Drake's own catalog is being turned into evidence against the argument he chose to make. That's what makes this so striking. The material doesn't just fuel the rivalry, it weakens his position in real time. Eventually, Kendrick will answer. Maybe not today, maybe not on anyone else's schedule. Still, when he does, it'll happen on his terms and in whatever form he chooses. That's always been part of his power. He doesn't rush, he doesn't chase. He moves when the moment belongs to him. By that stage, there may not be any strategic button left to press on the legal side. The paper trail is already there, and much of it comes straight from Drake's own releases. Leave this idea hanging in bold letters. Kendrick Lamar is the real Iceman here, not Drake. He's the figure whose presence makes the whole room tense. Even when he says nothing at all, people pause, wait, and watch.
For a while now, Drake's creative direction has seemed to circle the same absent figure, even when he tries to suggest it doesn't. Put team loyalty aside for a second and really sit with those 3 new tracks. Without that Kendrick-sized gap at the center, what are you actually hearing? It feels less like confidence and more like someone carrying on a private argument with a presence that never leaves the room. What stands out most on Iceman is hard to ignore. The rare flashes where Drake sounds focused, energized, and fully engaged happen in the exact moments when he appears to be reaching toward Kendrick's orbit. You can hear it in the reunion with Future, in the familiar rhythmic choices, in the cadences that feel closely modeled, and even in the visuals surrounding the release. Every major element seems drawn toward a single point of tension, and that point is not Drake himself. Remove Kendrick from the picture, and the issue isn't simply that Iceman becomes weaker. The whole thing starts to lose form. Suddenly, the record feels like a campaign without a cause. The sharper bars no longer land with the same purpose. The warnings and challenges no longer seem aimed anywhere specific. What looked intense starts to feel empty, like a dark set built around a missing centerpiece. That's what makes the next move so important. The moment Kendrick reappears in any real way, these 3 records are likely to be re-examined at high speed. Some lines may fade into side notes, others may be revisited more closely. Either way, they risk becoming a lasting record of how much Drake's work has been defined by that rivalry, whether he admits it or not. There's a shot in the Iceman rollout that tries hard to present Drake's comeback like a signal in the sky, a dramatic call meant to suggest the culture had been waiting in silence for him to return and take control again. The idea is clear: build suspense, create urgency, make it feel like the hero has arrived right on time.
Instead, it lands as one of the funniest accidental moments of the year. Because yes, Drake really did send a signal into the sky. The problem is, it seemed to call for the wrong person. Every awkward image, every costume-like persona, every strained callback, every glossy, overbuilt chapter of the campaign ended up pointing in one direction. Rather than announcing Drake's dominance, it felt like one giant public invitation that said, loud and clear, "Kendrick, the spotlight is waiting." That's what makes the whole thing so fascinating. The rollout was supposed to create anticipation for Drake's return, yet the energy around it suggested something very different. People weren't responding to the comeback his team planned. They were reacting to the possibility of someone else stepping into that moment and taking it over. Drake's camp wanted anticipation. What they really assembled was an arena. In this kind of battle, though, a stage never truly belongs to the person who built it. It belongs to the one who enters last and controls the ending. That's where the board stands now. J. Cole made his move, Drake responded and kept responding, shifting again and again like someone trying to flood the room with noise before the silence could settle in. All of that motion has led to this final tension hanging in the air. Only one major piece remains, one last turn, one last name, one final domino still standing, with everyone watching to see whether it falls or who chooses to push it. We've got the name, the clues,
and a trail of signals that all seemed to lead to the same place. Smack delivered that eerily calm, "Mark my words." Antonov kept turning up in studio chatter. Isaiah Rashad added his own account. At the Grammys, there was that mysterious wrapped hand. Even Dave Free appeared to be pointing in one clear direction. Put it all together, and the message feels impossible to ignore. The runway ahead of Kendrick has never looked more open.
Each hint keeps landing on the same conclusion. Something is coming. And the people closest to it are describing it as big in a way that almost sounds too modest for what they really mean. Whenever it finally arrives, it could take any form. Maybe it's a single. Maybe it's a full album. It could be a short film, a surprise release, or something no one online has even managed to predict yet. What makes the situation even more intense is the contrast everyone is already bracing for. On one side sits a 43-track rollout that feels overextended, guarded, and weighed down by an identity crisis. The material comes across like content built to defend, distract, and overwhelm rather than clearly say anything lasting. On the other side is the possibility of one tightly aimed release from an artist widely seen as one of the sharpest planners in modern rap. Timing matters too, and this moment seems almost perfectly set. The atmosphere has already been charged up, the audience is already watching, and the stage feels fully prepared. Ironically, much of that energy was created by the very opponent trying to block the spotlight. If that next Kendrick move hits the way these signs suggest, the conversation may shift immediately. This wouldn't feel like a simple exchange, or even a return. It would look more like a crowning moment, followed by the kind of effortless celebration that only happens when the outcome already feels decided. The trophy may as well already have a name etched into it. This ending has been signaled from far away, unfolding so clearly that the person on the losing side has no defense left, mainly because he laid out the path himself, Aubrey. And yes, this will probably make its way back to your circle, so let's keep it direct. This is the moment you asked for. More than that, you pushed for it. 3 albums, 43 tracks, a full visual rollout, a non-stop promotional wave that seemed built around challenging one person.
There's no legal escape route for what happens next. A verse can't be ordered into silence. A hook doesn't disappear because paperwork gets involved. The entrance was opened by you, kept open by you, and by the time it was over, you practically invited him inside and gave him full access. Now, everything points to Kendrick Lamar making the next move. If the reports and quiet signals from that camp mean anything, something is already being put together. When it arrives, it won't be landing in a vacuum. It will hit a culture that has been completely flooded, worn down, and made ready for something new. That's the twist in all of this. The stage looks perfectly set, and not by accident. The space has been cleared. The audience is waiting. The appetite for a reset is there. Whether intended or not, the groundwork appears finished, and the runway is sitting there wide open for Dot. At this point, all that's left is the moment itself. Does Kendrick go for the quick strike with a single? Does he come through with a full album? Or does he do what everyone fears most and appear without warning? Let me know what you think. When does it happen? How does he make the move? And if that drop really is coming, what does it look like? Will this be a complete launch or something more controlled? Will he call people out directly or leave the message inside the records like he did last time? More importantly, how intense is this next phase really going to be? If you're watching this unfold in real time, now is the moment to stay connected. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and keep your eyes on this space. The instant anything becomes official, you'll want to be here talking about it live, not hearing about it later through someone else's repost.
Something is clearly shifting. The Iceman image is starting to crack. The boogeyman feels closer than ever. And if Smack is right, and Smack usually is, then hip-hop may be on the edge of one of its most unforgettable turning points in years. Stay ready. Don't look away. Don't check out too soon. The next move begins the second he gives the signal. And once that happens, everything around this story changes. The timeline you casually scroll through today may look completely different when you come back to it tomorrow. What used to be framed as the big 3 may be heading toward a very different conclusion. The lane is cleared. The message is out. The pressure is building. The boogeyman is standing at the entrance. And somewhere behind closed doors, far from cameras, leaks, and mistakes, the final piece is being put into place. You can feel it. The
The setup is almost complete. Every quiet pause, every hint, every carefully timed move seems to be leading to one thing. Whatever happens next won't just be another moment in the conversation. It could reshape the entire conversation. So stay close, because when this chapter finally opens, it won't arrive quietly. And once it starts, there may be no turning back. Ink is sliding across the page as we speak, and with every razor-sharp line, a bold new era in modern rap is taking shape right before our eyes.